So could you please give us a bit of a background as to how your selection process in choosing the subjects who end up on the film and how long it takes you to do?
Hi, thanks for sticking around. In total, the whole film took 4 years to make, from start to finish, from raising money to the edit. The raising money actually was really long and arduous, and it took a long time, and that probably is why the film took so long to make in the end. But actually, in some way, it was to our benefit, because it meant sort of a greater intimacy with our subjects, especially Prachi, the woman fundamentalist that you see. Ruhi actually was somebody that I met in the 2011 pageant, and I met her just slightly before the pageant began, and just got to know her really through the process of the pageant. And you know, if it feels really intimate with Ruhi, it's also because when people are in a situation like that where they have a dream and they're really trying to achieve it, they're so vulnerable. And so they're a lot more open. So I think part of the intimacy with Ruhi came simply because she was vulnerable and she needed somebody to talk to. What happens? You know, we were actually on a panel this morning, and it was one of the things that came up. But what's interesting, when you're making a film, you almost sort of become two people. You know, you sort of develop this kind of split personality where you're sort of the human being that is responding to things and can't help but feel a tremendous number of emotions. And then you're also the filmmaker, you know, and you're also really aware of what your job is as the filmmaker. And it's to not be judgmental, you know. It's really to, for me anyway, it's really to sort of try to present things as they are, you know, within the complexity of, you know, the situations that they, and the context and the countries that they are occurring in. Because I feel in some sense that the only way we're going to really make any kind of tremendous change is if we try to understand people as opposed to judging people. So I try to stay away from that. No. The long and short is no. No, not yet. I mean, we've been actually turned down from a couple of festivals in India because of the subject matter. We have, however, been accepted into one. So it's going to be screening, the film will screen in India in November. And so we'll see what happens with it. I mean, there was talk at some point about there being a theatrical release, but I don't think that's going to happen. I mean, for me, you know, what I would really like to do, I think it's a really important film for India. And I think what I would really like to do is to sort of work with NGOs and grassroots activists and sort of take it across the country that way. You know? Yes, yeah, they have actually. I had a screening a few months ago with Ruhi, and then a separate screening with Prachi and her family. And it was so interesting, actually, because they all really liked each other, you know? So Ruhi really thought Prachi was very interesting. And then when I showed the film to Prachi and her family, they really wanted Ruhi to win. You know? So it was really quite amazing. And Prachi's father, I mean, to me this was the most extraordinary thing, actually. Prachi's father cried when Pooja's mom tells her story about possibly having to kill Pooja. The pageant camp was actually, it was pretty straightforward. I mean, there's a lot of red tape and nobody returns your calls in India. Like, that happens a fair bit, so you have to be really persistent. But once, you know, getting access to the Miss India wasn't that difficult. It wasn't such an onerous process. Maintaining the access once I got into the filming was tough. That was tough, actually. And it was just so unorganized, and you know, everything it was always chaos. You know, just constant chaos. So you're always negotiating this chaos. Getting access to the fundamentalist camp was a lot more complicated, obviously, and that took 2 years. So it was basically what I did was I decided that I was going to have to spend a lot of time in India, you know, in order for them to kind of really trust me and to get to know me. So I just kind of based myself out of India for months at a time. And then I just spent just long hours, so many cups of tea and conversations with people at various levels of the fundamentalist movement. And then finally, after 2 years, they said, okay, you can shoot. So, I think, so the question is basically, what did the majority of people within India, how did the majority of people in India respond to something like this? Are the majority of people fundamentalists?
That's right.
Yeah. And the answer, thankfully, is no. So that's the,
Good.
yeah, very good. That said, you can't sort of underestimate the danger of the nationalist movement in India, and the power sort of, has come and gone, like it's sort of like a wave, and it sort of peaked in 2000, between 1992 and 2004, and it sort of declined, but there's always the possibility that it comes back, and in certain parts of India, it's on the rise, So that's why the government sort of monitors these camps, and they have in the past sort of tried to shut them down.
And which region of India that these camps are more prevalent?
They actually, the camps are all over.
Mm-hmm.
They take place all over the country, and they have them for boys as well as girls. Actually, originally the film was really just sort of going to be about Miss India, and how Miss India was sort of showing this country, how Miss India was sort of a prism through which you saw a country going through transition, and the role of women in that transition. And then I started to read about the opposition to the pageants, which comes from both the Hindu fundamentalists and the feminist groups in India. So then it became sort of this, it was supposed to be about 3 kind of interconnecting storylines. And so the feminists were actually a very big part of the story, and I filmed with them. But 2 things happened. One, I wanted the feminists to sort of put things into context, But they sort of had, or maybe it was just the feminists that I filmed with, they had such an extreme, they also had such an extreme position. And so the film then became about 3 extreme positions, and it was just too much, And also there was just too much material, and I had to make a choice. And for me, I think what had always sort of attracted me to the story was how India itself was a country that was going through change, and how it was sort of struggling between what it was going to be, and whether that future was going to be, I say modern in quotation marks, I guess Western and capitalist, or if it was going to be religious and traditional. And so that's when I decided I would just sort of focus on those two groups. And then I also wanted to understand how those 2 different realities were sort of playing themselves out on the bodies of women, and how women were sort of also shaping the country. So, I don't know if that answers your question.
And have you shown the film to any sort of feminist groups? And I'm just curious about their reaction to the film.
No, not yet, but I will when I go back to India, and hopefully I'll work with some feminist organizations in India. That's a big question. It's a really complicated question, actually. I don't even know if I can do it justice in such a short sort of span of time. But I feel concerned, I guess. I feel concerned about India, but I also feel cautiously optimistic, about India. And I think what the process of making this film did for me was that I felt like I needed to start understanding time in a different way, and to look at time not just sort of in the immediate and the linear, but also the past, the present, and the future, and the fact that things are constantly in a state of flux, things are constantly evolving. And this was just one part of the evolution.
And did you have plans to make, for your next future projects, do you have plans to deal with India, about the changes in India? Is that your plans, or you want to move back to Canada to do something about Canada?
No, I think I'll always film India, actually. So I think the next thing is sort of global. It's a series. But for sure, I'll also shoot.
Also set in Indian
Part of
subjects,
it,
yeah.
will be, yeah. No, I never felt that. I mean, I guess a couple of times, maybe with Ruhi, you know, she's a bit sort of reality, you know, she's a little bit reality TV girl, so every now and then there was like, I think I'm going to call my dad, like those sorts of moments. But I thought they were sweet and they were fun, and, you know, so I let that stuff in. But I think there's just a real intimacy that developed, you know, over the course of making this film, because because of how much time we spent, especially with Prachi and the girls in the fundamentalist camp, and B, just because they wanted to, you know, they wanted to talk.
So are you in touch with the subjects like Ruhi and
Prachi?
Yeah, Prachi.
Yeah. Ruhi, not as much, but Prachi, yes. Yeah.
And what is she up to now? Still?
Prachi is having a hard time. Yeah. That's a really good question. The question was, as a woman, was I perceived as being modern? And did I ever have to sort of act kind of traditional in order to, I guess, get access and to relate to the people? I was definitely perceived as Western. You know, that's how I was perceived. Probably with loose moral values, also. And did I ever have to play up tradition? No. I actually decided I wasn't going to do that. That I wasn't going to pretend to be something that I wasn't, because I didn't think that was fair, and I didn't think it was right. So I wanted people to know me and accept me on my terms, you know. So I was really, really clear with them that I didn't agree with their beliefs and the way they perceived women, but that I wanted to understand them. So.
When you say they, you mean the organizers for the beauty pageants, or the subjects that you interviewed?
Just everyone. Like anyone that sort of asked me what my angle was, you know, whether it was the fundamentalists or whether it was the pageant world. I was always straight with them. Ankita, who went on, who was the third winner, the Miss India International, she was the one that I sort of filmed with. Ankita is starting to get into Bollywood, so she'll do really well, I think. I think she'll succeed. The other two winners I didn't really sort of stay in touch with. And Ruhi I'm sort of in touch with. When I'm in India, I see her. And Ruhi just so desperately wants to win a contest, you know. So she just keeps entering these beauty pageants, and she enters them in India and then outside of India, you know. And so far she's crownless.
How does she make a living? Her parents have to support her.
Her parents support her, and then she also does some modeling. You know, the interesting thing about the Miss India, what it does is, it really is sort of a launching pad. So even if you've lost, you know, even if you don't win, the exposure that it gives you is quite extraordinary. So a lot of them go on to fairly interesting modeling careers. You know? And Ruhi, I think, she'll do fairly well if she can, you know, get a gig, but on doing reality TV. Hey, it's a living.
Well, thank you very much for coming, and thank you, Nisha.